So Kelly and crew are ready to go. We're ready to go. Okay, we will call the meeting to order. We respectfully acknowledge that the County of Haliburton is located on Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. We acknowledge a shared presence of Indigenous nations throughout the area and recognize its Indigenous and its original inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. Could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda for this afternoon? Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Shell.
Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Shell. Be it resolved that the agenda for the September 13th, 2023 special meeting of Haliburton County Council be hereby approved.
All in favor? That's carried. Is there any notice of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof this afternoon? Hearing none, we'll get into our primary item of business for this afternoon, and that is a presentation on communal services being presented by the County of Frontenac, and we have Kelly Pender, CAO from the County of Frontenac, as well as Joe Gallivan, who is the Director of Planning and Economic Development there. Welcome, gentlemen, and over to you.
Madam Warden, I'd like to declare a conflict of interest. Mr. Rutter has promised me a beer at a future meeting.
Oh, well, we'll make sure that he comes good on that promise. I promise you.
It's our pleasure to be here today and appreciate the opportunity to discuss an important project for Frontenac County and give you some information in terms of where we're going and perhaps how we can help you or at least guide you in a direction that may support your wonderful county.
Yeah.
So if you'd like to move forward with your presentation, there we go.
Okay. So I think I'll start at the front part of our presentation, and Kelly will talk to you about the model that we've come up with to implement this, which is very important for you to get a feel for. So again, my name is Joe Gallivan. I'm the Director of Planning and Economic Development for Frontenac. I've been with the county for 15 years. Prior to that, I spent 7 years with Municipal Affairs in Eastern Region and was fortunate to come up to Haliburton a couple of times. God's country for sure. So what we're going to go over with you is why we started this project, but a couple of things I'll say to you right off the top. First of all, this is not rocket science. It's pretty straightforward as long as you have the support. You have the support from your community, support around the county council table, support from township councils and township staff. The other thing that's really important is that the model that we're going towards very shortly is something that is very easily transferable to other jurisdictions in Ontario. In fact, we've been told that this utility we're going to set up it doesn't have a geographic boundary. For example, if the counties next to us want to join someday, maybe they could as well. But it's something that Haliburton could do should you be interested. So next slide, please, Mark. So really 4 things to talk to you about this afternoon. Why are we doing this, or why do we start this? I have 3 examples to show you of projects we've been working on the last few years that are related to using communal services to develop. And Kelly will talk to you about the regional public utility that Frontenac is going to establish to implement this. And then he'll also explain our next steps. So next, please. So first of all, I'll explain why are we doing this? Why did we start? Next. So here's Frontenac in a nutshell. We have villages. We don't have any towns. We have a number of villages, very historic settlement areas. None of our villages or hamlets have water and sewer, municipal water and sewer. The only exception is one village near Kingston. It's called Sydenham. It has a municipal water system, primarily because the Ministry of the Environment issued an order about 25 years ago because of well contamination in the village. So they had to establish a water system. We will never have municipal water or sewer in Frontenac. It's fiscally impossible for our 4 small municipalities to afford that kind of project. I'm sure just like Haliburton, we have these settlement areas, our villages on relatively small lots. They each have their own well and septic. Some of these lots are over a century old, well over a century old. So we have these settlement areas with small lots. However, these villages also have significant public investment. That's where our most of our commercial assessment is found. It's certainly where infrastructure such as sidewalks, street lighting, parks, etc., are located. And the majority, as I've already said, the majority of commercial assessment is found in our villages. So it's important that we keep them sustainable in the long term. Next, please. So the current state of communal services in Ontario. So if you're a planner, you have to work with the Ontario provincial policy statement. And right in that statement, the province has set priorities for servicing. Their preferred number 1 type of servicing is full municipal services. The second one is communal services, and I'll explain in more detail exactly what that is. And then the third is private septic and wells. So it is a preferred option. And in fact, the most recent provincial policy statement, the 2020 statement, added additional policies to promote the use of these services. One of the biggest problems, though, we discovered, we knew beforehand, was that the Ministry of the Environment, if you're going to build a development on communal water and sewer, and you're a private developer, you have to enter into a contract with that municipality, that township you're building in. It's called a Municipal Responsibility Agreement. It's also called an MRA. And it's a requirement should the developer go bankrupt or disappear, or should the systems fail and the developer doesn't have the money to fix them, then the municipality must intervene and fix the problem. So in many situations, certainly for all of our 4 townships, they cannot afford the cost of fixing that problem should it ever appear. So, very wise fiscal decision they make is they will tell a developer, well, if you're going to install, for example, $1 million worth of water and sewer in the ground, you can cut us another check for $1 million, which we'll put in a reserve fund just in case something goes wrong. So that essentially doubles the investment in the development. And in many cases across the province, the developer has walked away. It's got nothing to do with good planning or whether there's community support for it. It's just that the developer says, I can't make that additional 100% investment. And that's why we don't have any of these in our county anyway. I think you may have a few in Haliburton. So, but anyway, that's why we've never had anyone come up with that kind of proposal for us at this time. Next, please. So we've been working on this project for almost 7 years. And it started with a simple statement that's in our county official plan. And that is lack of municipal services in our villages challenges future community viability. So planners have to think 25, 50, 100 years ahead. And if nothing was going to change in Frontenac, if we were going to continue to build everything on private septic and well, regardless of whether it's residential or commercial industrial, then what would Frontenac look like 100 years from now? Minimum lot size for a residential lot is between 1.5 and 2 acres. And would we end up with severances all over our rural areas? What would lots look like around existing villages? How could we attract industrial uses into our region if they have to make major significant investments on septics and wells for their operations? So that was the starting point for us. In other words, we can't keep doing what we're doing. We shouldn't keep doing what we're doing in terms of the way we develop on services in Frontenac. Next, please. So this is a very simple cartoon graphic of the differences in the services. And I still keep getting questions about what are communal systems because they're really not that well known. So on the left side of the screen is your conventional municipal sewer system, for example, with a giant water treatment plant or sewer plant, considerable financial investment in the box where you're going to treat water and sewer, and then laying those pipes in the ground. And then at the top part of the lake, you've got your standard private well and septic on each lot. And on the right-hand side are communal systems where you can build one water system and one septic treatment system and connect it to a number of lots, whether they be industrial, commercial, or residential. The benefit, one of the major benefits for this type of system in a rural setting is that they are very scalable. You don't have to, the developer doesn't have to build expensive infrastructure for, let's say, 50 lots at the start of a process. It essentially, in plain language, these systems are like Lego blocks. You can start with a system that can handle 5 or 10 or 15 lots, and it can be expanded over time. So it's a really good type of treatment system for the rate of growth we deal in our rural areas. Next, please. So some of the advantages, very quickly, there's significant advantages to the environment. Better environmental protection. I know that best practices, people tell you if you have a septic, you should be inspecting it every 5 years. And I don't think a lot of people do that. These systems, especially because we're going to be setting up a utility, will be monitored on a daily basis. If something breaks, it'll be fixed right away. There is, instead of a number of wells punched into the aquifer, you find one part of the aquifer that can deliver high quality and quantity of water, and you just use that rather than the entire aquifer, for example. And I'll show you a septic treatment system in a minute that is far better for the environment than a standard septic system. Next, please. And then from the planning side of things, if you're able to support residential development in these villages that can better knit into the village, you know, we've already got smaller lots, so communal services allow you to look at approving residential communities that are on lots that are similar in size. So we've got situations in Frontenac where we've got development in our formal settlement area boundaries around villages, but there's no integration with these subdivisions with the rest of the community. They're standalone state residential development. But with the smaller lots, you have potentially more people, a mix of people, more walkable communities. So there's benefits from the community planning side as well. Next, please. So at the very last slide, you'll see a link to our website that you can look at all of these documents that Kelly and I are going to talk to you about this afternoon. So our council had vision back in 2016 to agree to start looking at what would the value be of communal services. And we did 2 pieces of work, and this is the first one, just an overarching review of what are the benefits, risks, and advantages of developing on communal services. Next, please. So it looked at different systems. It looked at ways that we can control the risk of building on communal. It provided us with some official plan policies for using them. Talked about how the value this type of development would bring to our settlement areas. They showed us some case studies, and then I've underlined the financial model, which really, how you operate these systems and manage these systems is crucial to, in our situation, to making them viable across the entire region. Because when we're done with this project, we'll be able to tell any developer, you can come anywhere in Frontenac and you can build on communal systems, and you don't have to enter into a municipal responsibility agreement with each township, because the utility will manage these systems. They will become public infrastructure, and Kelly will talk to you some more about that. So each township doesn't have to worry about the financial risk of allowing these into their community. All they have to do is make sure that this development proposal meets their local official plan and has community support. That's the key. Is it good planning or not? It's not the financial piece. Next, please. So as part of this study, and to try to make it real for our decision makers, we asked the planners and engineers and the consulting firm we retained to take a real life example of a subdivision we had recently approved on individual well and septic, and ask them to say, you know, if it was good, if this subdivision was built on communal, what would the difference be? So this is a aerial shot of a community called Inverary. It's near the city of Kingston. So it's probably a 15-minute drive to downtown Kingston. So there's people who live here and work in the city of Kingston. So there's a demand for residential units here. Next slide, please. So I've just highlighted the area that I'm going to speak to you about, the subdivision we dealt with a number of years ago. It's a 69-acre parcel of land with some wetlands on it, a little bit of woodland. And so we said to the consultants, show us what could happen if a developer was able to use communal services. Next, please. So this is the brochure they produced. And it really was an eye-opener for our politicians to see this could make a difference. So on the left side of the screen, you've got the development that Frontenac County Council approved, which is 16 lots, 16 single detached lots, about two and a half units per acre. And these are the types of subdivisions that we've always built in Frontenac, because we only have one service option, and that's the individual well and septic. On the other side of the screen, it was a theoretical development on the same land using communal services. So instead of 16 lots, they showed a mix of residential uses to show the value of other housing options, which we can't do right now. 41 single detached units, 9 townhouses, an apartment building in the lower left for seniors or whoever, and a commercial use. And then in the top right side of the screen, you see that, I'm colorblind, I think it's red, I can't tell. That is the green space. That's where the communal septic treatment field would be, but it could be used as passive open space as well. So this was a good step for our council to see that this could make a difference. There would be different options for us to look at planning for our communities. Next, please. So I'm just going to talk briefly about what these boxes look like. This is a company that is operating in the city of Brockville. So they're not somebody we're promoting. It's just that they are they're in Eastern Ontario. They're a 40-minute drive from Frontenac. And I've got to know the company through some meetings I've had with them over the years as I learned more about communal system. It's called New Terra. So that is about the size of a sea can. And they call that the R108. So that box can service 108 residential units. And in May of this year, we took our county council members on a site tour of their 450,000 square foot plant, so they could physically see how these systems work and how they're put together and what's inside the box. And it was a good opportunity for our council to see. So we walked through the box, and I can tell you that as they showed us, all the pipes at the start, when the sewage comes in, they look like standard plastic treatment pipes. And as the CAO of the company said, all the pipes you see here, you could buy at Home Depot. Like, this is not specialized technology. The only specialized technology is at the end of the box, where they have a filtration system that they own, and that's where they treat the septage. And what I've learned over time, and engineers have said this in our public meetings, that the water, the septage, whatever you want to call it, that comes out at the end of the pipe is probably going to be better than it will be better than the water quality of a standard septic system. And if it's going to be treated and then put in a lake, for example, it'll be of better quality than the lake itself. And we're dealing with that with the project I'll show you in a minute. So it was an eye-opener for our council, because as they took us through, they showed they were transferring these, or building these boxes, and one was going to Ethiopia, another one was going to France, one was going up into the Arctic. So they can be used all over the world. Next, please. This is just a photograph of a simple installation. I believe this was a box that's been put into a resort in the Muskoka region. The other thing they showed us a number of images that you can make these boxes look unobtrusive. You can put a pitched roof on them, and you can put architectural design on the outside that they can look like a garage or another house. So they don't stand out like a sea can that you would see on potentially on somebody's rural property. Next slide, please. I'm just showing you this slide of Nuterra, where they've put these in the world. And you can see they've installed over 20,000 of these systems in North America. What struck me when I looked at this is that look how many have been built in the US, not a lot across Canada, and not a lot in Ontario. And I think what we've learned in this journey is that the main reason they're not being built in Ontario is because of the legislation. It's the fiscal risk that's put on municipalities through having to enter into an MRA. And then there's another piece we're not going to get into today, but that's the environmental approvals process, which we've learned has to be updated to recognize that these systems are much better than standard septic and wells, and should have an easier approval process for a public utility that's going to take them over. So that's something else that Kelly and I are working on in the next year or two. And it's another piece that we have to overcome as well. Next, please. So I'm going to quickly show you 3 projects that we've been working on across Frontenac, just to give you some examples. Next. So to give you some context, here's a map of our county. I'm going to talk about 3 communities. The first one, you can see Highway 7 going from west to east across just above the central Frontenac words. Towards the eastern side of the county, there's a little village called Charlotte Lake. I'm going to talk about that. And then if you follow Highway 38, number 38, down into the South Frontenac Township area, there's a community called Verona. And then as you'll see, the city of Kingston breaks this up. We also, as part of the county, we have 2 major islands, Frontenac Islands. They're Wolf Island and Howe Island. And there's a village on Wolf called Marysville that we've been doing work on, which I'll talk to you about as well. Next, please. So I'll start with Charlotte Lake. We started this work in 2021. Next. So this is the village. You can see it's a beautiful village. Charlotte Lake there's 2 basins, the West Basin, which is a lake trout lake, and the East Basin. Very historic village. It's been there for over 200 years. The area that I've highlighted in yellow is a 2.5 acre parcel of land that Township Council purchased in 2017. It's a former public school site. Shortly after they bought it, they demolished the school because it had asbestos issues. And at the time, and the township continues to look at building housings specifically for seniors to help them stay in the community. And originally, they were going to use this parcel of land and use the existing well and the existing septic from the school and use those to build a total of 8 units. While they were looking at thinking about doing that, we had started the communal services work. So we worked with the mayor and the CAO to ask council to pause to see what the opportunities would be if the township built something using communal services rather than the well and septic. And we were able to get a grant from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities that paid 50% of that work. Next, please. So the study was just done last year, planning and engineering. It said if you build, definitely communal services would be a feasible opportunity. Instead of 8 units, you could potentially have 2 3-story apartment buildings, 40 to 50 residential units. Charlotte Lake would be used to bring the water in for drinking and septage, and then it would go out into the other side of the lake, which is not as sensitive. We've had a lot of conversations with the community about what that septage is, the water quality, and then it will be good. It'll be better water quality than what's in that East Basin right now. And then the other thing that council wanted to do was what would the potential be of hooking up this box into other nearby uses. So for example, a stone's throw away is the village community hall, which is used for council meetings. It's used for community events, Christmas parties, you name it. And so I think that they will make a decision to at least hook the hall in, and possibly a couple of churches, which are also used for a lot of community events. Next, please. This is just a model that the consultants did to give council and the citizens a sense of what would these buildings look like. Now, I can tell you that after the last election, there was a 75% turnover of this council. So we've started back at the beginning in terms of providing them the information they need to understand this project. We had a pop-up at the local supermarket about 3 weeks ago. And we're having a special meeting where people will come in and we'll mark up maps and everything and ask them to decide what they really want there on the site. Do they want just residential, for example, or potentially would they like the old library in the village to move on to the site? Those kinds of things. And right now we've had almost 900 responses to our survey, which is amazing for a community that, you know, doesn't have a high population. So by the end of the year, we'll have enough information for council to decide exactly what they want to go on that site. Next, please. So Marysville is on Wolf Island, and we did what's called a secondary plan just before COVID in 2019. Next. So there's big changes coming to the island. This is an image of, you see a ferry there. That's a brand new ferry. It isn't running yet. The current ferry is a 55-car ferry. This ferry was built in Romania. It's here now. It's 86 cars. It's electric. The big difference is this dock you see in this picture is being built right now. It's almost finished. This will allow the Wolf Island ferry to dock permanently in the village 4 seasons of the year. Right now, when it gets cold and the ice comes in, the ferry can't dock in the village because of the ice conditions. They have to dock out in the countryside, but now you'll be able to live in the village of Marysville and you'll be able to walk on that ferry without a car and go to downtown Kingston, and you can walk to your job or you can get a rapid transit bus to other parts of the city. So when we talked to the previous council, we said, think change is coming and you can either plan for it or it's going to hit you and you'll have to do it on the run. So they chose to be proactive and we did this secondary plan. Next, please. So this is just an aerial view of the village. That's the old dock you can see in front. It's a population of about 300 people right now. Next. This is an aerial overhead I wanted to show you before I show you the planning map. So you can see the village is relatively close to the water. Every house is less than a 10-minute walk to the ferry. And then you've got all the farms and waterfront properties around the large island itself. Next. So we did the work, and essentially with the population projections, we had consultants run projections based on the improved transportation system. And I'm sure you've dealt with this with your official plans. We had to expand the village boundary. So the darker color at the bottom of the screen, we've pulled the village boundary back to the south. And that's to accommodate an additional 300 people over the next 20 years. Next, please. So that's it to the 353 residents they could potentially deal with. Next. Just one other point on that. So I didn't keep the slide in that says that the plan itself, the amendment that was passed by Township Council last year and has been approved by County Council, says that all new development in the village will be on communal services. And for Marysville, it'll be quite simple because it'll be able to take the water out of Lake Ontario and put it back on Lake Ontario. So the next one is Village of Verona, which is a small village, population, probably 400 people, close enough to Kingston that people commute into work in Kingston during the day. Next, please. So the council of the Township of South Frontenac looked at they did a housing master plan and looked at how do we bring other forms of housing into the village? How do we bring in apartments for seniors? That was a priority for them. What do we have to do to make that happen? Next. So this is really their concept plan. They're looking at a variety of different types of housing to knit right into the existing fabric. There's a number of vacant lots that the township owns off the main street. Next. So this is sort of a proposed master plan for new development. That's all white is all brand new development. Next. And here's the type of housing they're looking at. And again, they can't build any of this mixed housing or townhouses on septic. So at this stage, the township is almost finished an environmental assessment to look at developing all of this new development on communal services, whether they create a municipal well in the village or they take the water out of Howes Lake, which is immediately adjacent to Verona. Next. So yeah, potentially over 120 new units in the village, significant growth, and recommending use of communal services. So we've got 3 projects that we're at different stages at, but we've got community support for, and we've had conversations with the community on the benefits of communal services, and then there seems to be support from all 3 municipalities. Next. So just to summarize the benefits, it works for the county because you've got different types of development potential. You can grow the tax base, better environmental protection. Councils can, with working with citizens, can now decide what type of housing they can actually build apartments or mixed housing in their communities using communal. Instead of spread out development that would be built on private septic and wells, you're going to have more density so you can reduce your delivery costs. Works for developers because they can address different markets. They now have a chance to build different densities in our region that they never did before. And they know that there'll be certainty on servicing. So we had a focus group with developers during this project, and they were very excited to see where we were going. And I remember one of the developers said to us, like, are you telling me that I've got to pay all the infrastructure. I've got to pay for the box for sewage, and I got to pay for the well, and I've got to put the pipes in the ground for the houses. But when I've got that all done, I turn the keys over to the Frontenac municipal utility, and we said yes. They said, well, this is great for us because we can market to people that they never have to worry about their well and septic. We'll be able to build more housing, and there is no rental housing available in Frontenac. So there's a demand there, and there's a demand for apartments as well. So they see the market. And then it works for the residents because we're going to ensure with communal that we'll have good water treatment and septic treatment, and then more housing. And they know that in the long term, the water systems that are put into these developments will be useful in the long term. And Kelly will talk to you about the utility. So we will hook a utility box into each house, and you will pay a utility fee. The other thing I should mention is that we did talk to some of the companies that install this and manage these systems across Ontario, because we had a lot of questions about why would I want to pay a monthly utility fee when I've got my well and my septic. So cost of water and sewer, a monthly utility bill would run somewhere between $200, $250 a month. And if you think of the cost of building a well and installing a septic, and you run that over 25 years, there's really no difference. But you never have to worry about maintaining these systems if you're on communal. So I think that's my part done. Next, please. So I am now going to turn it over to our CAO, Kelly Pender. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, and through you, Warden Danielson. Appreciate the opportunity today, and it strikes me that there probably aren't 2 counties in Eastern Ontario within the Warden's Caucus that are any more similar than Haliburton and Frontenac. And initially you wouldn't think that, but our budgets are similar, our scope of services is fairly similar, our populations. The southernmost point of the Canadian Shield is in Frontenac County. 2/3 of our landscape looks very much like Haliburton County, and it's a really good mix, and we're our commercial assessment and industrial assessment is low. Our tax base is low and spread out. At the same time, just as Haliburton, I'm sure we're seeing lots of development pressures. We're just over an hour from Ottawa. All of our southern townships are very close to the city of Kingston, which is growing and bustling. And so we're seeing pressures all over our community, and we can't continue to do development on 2-acre lots throughout the county. It just the good lots are gone. The bad lots are difficult to maintain or to build on, and difficult to service and maintain. So this is the answer that we've come up to was the Municipal Service Corporation. And I know for Councillor Burton and Warren Danielson, quite familiar with the Eastern Ontario Regional Network, EORN, and their work. That's essentially a municipal service corporation. So it's a hands-off organization established by the municipality to do certain works. There's a regulation within the Municipal Act that lays out the requirements, which is essentially public consultation and the development of a business case, which we completed in 2021, 2022. All 4 of our municipalities, and we had 23 municipalities before amalgamation in 1998, and we have 4 now: North, Central, South, and the islands, and they've all voted in favor of becoming shareholders in the corporation. The shares will be based upon weighted assessment on the day of incorporation, which since the final vote was held in June, our lawyers are working on that, and we hope to have the incorporation papers before the end of the year. And on our council agenda next Wednesday is the request for the municipalities to appoint their members to the board. The county is a 20% shareholder in the corporation. However, the county isn't a voting shareholder. It's just the townships. And our logic there went something along the lines of the county is the municipalities. If the mayor of South Frontenac gets a vote as the warden of the county, he can cancel his own vote as the mayor of South Frontenac. So the simple answer for us was, let's just go with a corporation where the shareholders are the 4 townships, 20% held by the county of Frontenac. So the county will pay in, but will not have any votes per se. Next slide, please. So the second study we did, and again, it was with WSP Engineering and Consulting, was to look at governance and how does this work. So, governance is really important, and I'm sure the same thing in Haliburton. We wanted to make sure that we had consensus as to what the governance model would look like. This wasn't a staff-driven process. It was the 4 mayors were appointed to the steering committee, and we had 3 public members that we solicited from the general population of Frontenac County, one with an expertise in finance, and who'd also been involved in development of a communal services project in Fort Erie. A gentleman by the name of Jim McIntosh. You may have heard of McIntosh Perry Engineering. Jim was the principal that set up McIntosh Perry Consulting, and was also the public works manager or director for the town of Perth. Extensive experience in development and communal services. And the third was a local resident who had extensive experience in governance. So we charged WSP with coming up with various models, and this was probably a 6-month process. There were 7 different meetings, lots of back and forth between the governance committee, as we called it, and the townships, and a public meeting at the end to talk about the business case. Next slide, please. So at the end of the day, and you can review all of the options considered in some of the other organizations that we looked at. But a municipal service model, the recommendation was that it presents the best benefit and the easiest way to make this happen and protect the municipal interests that were going to be involved. Next slide, please. So the municipal service structure, some basic information. As I said, the Municipal Service Corporation becomes a hands-off corporation, no different than EORN, although the 13 upper tier municipalities in Eastern Ontario are the shareholders for EORN. They don't direct the day-to-day operations. That's done by Jason St. Pierre as the CEO under the direction of an independent board of directors that Councillor Burton had sat on for many years. So there's that separation, and it's a expertise based board that guides the operations. We wanted it to be business oriented. This isn't we're not setting this up necessarily to have share dividends or to generate money for the municipalities, but we wanted to make sure that the decisions were being made based upon what is the best economic solution for a given situation. So, for example, the Verona proposal likely going to start with a housing project with affordable housing units as part of that. But the idea is, because it's communal services and it's like Lego blocks, as Joe says, it can grow and service the entire community. It does allow for profit, so the corporation can make profit. We have set it up such that there is an overall holding company, which will be the 4 municipal township representatives who will vote on general direction matters, but not operational matters, and then an operating company, which will essentially become the utility. They'll have separate finances, so we don't impinge upon the borrowing capacity of the county of Frontenac. This corporation can borrow on the open market, can apply for grants and operate as a separate entity without impacting the bottom line of any municipality. And it would allow for a consistent approach. As Joe said, one of the things that we're looking at in our report next week, we're going to appoint a technical advisory committee to begin to look at, what types of systems are to be installed. What will the assumption process look like? And the assumption process will look like something similar to a road assumption agreement in a plan of subdivision in your county, where it would meet a certain threshold and be built to municipal standards. And that will take time out of the planning and development process. So we may look at, for example, 3 different models: the Acme 1, 2, 3, the Jericho ABC, and the Zebra XYZ as being pre-approved, system designed. As long as you're purchasing those and installing those, you're pre-approved. And that will also make the maintenance side of that operation more effective, because we'll be able to stock parts and develop expertise in the operation and maintenance of those systems. Next slide, please. So ownership, services, and the corporation remain 100% publicly owned by participating municipalities. And in fact, in Ontario, a water system has to be publicly owned. So we need to meet that threshold. And that was one of the things that we had our legal firm, which is Templeman out of Belleville, provide us with some guidance in terms of how to set this up to deal with the legalities. There's an opportunity for a smooth launch since there's no existing systems in place. Our business case does state that at some point we may consider the water treatment facility in Sydenham that Joe referenced earlier, but that will be a decision of South Frontenac. They currently are operated by Utilities Kingston. Corporation control and flexibility is very important to be able to, some development is going to be planned for and others just going to walk through the door. So we wanted to make sure that we were flexible and able to address demand as it came through the door, and the management aspect. And we were looking at different management options. In the beginning, it's likely to be contracted out. We've got 2 utilities on our border, both of which have the capabilities to manage and operate these systems. And both have expressed some level of willingness to talk to us. There's also Aqua that does it, and a couple of other private companies that would handle the operations. As standalone operations, these are not staffed operations, so it's not like a water treatment plant or a sewage treatment plant where there's a staff on duty. These are all managed through SCADA systems, and the backup systems are all in place to ensure that there isn't discharges and those kinds of things. So fairly plug and play. You can buy the parts at Home Depot or Canadian Tire, and the corporation will develop the expertise to own and operate these. Next slide, please. So we're at the next steps portion, and we have adopted the business case, which was number 4, and we've drafted and approved the agreements and documents. We're in the final phases of that, and we'll have the board of directors appointed before the end of October. And we've also worked with the local CAOs and treasurers on an asset transfer policy, which is a mandatory component of the regulation under the Municipal Act. And basically that's how you treat the assets of the corporation, or the assumption of assets from outside the corporation. So that could be everything from the corporation buying a pickup truck from a municipality to assuming the water treatment plant in Sydenham, or expanding the boundaries to, say, Lennox and Addington or Lanark County on our boundaries. And we are in the final stages of appointing the board officers and directors and approving that asset management plan as soon as the lawyers are done with the incorporation process. Next slide, please. So why a municipal service corporation? Next, please. So if you, and I think the consultants did a really good job of explaining this to the governance committee and to the councils. If you had to insure your own car, you'd need $2 to $5 million in the bank in the event of a catastrophic accident. But because we all partake in insurance, we pay substantially less than that. So essentially, we're going to go from no communal services to 10 within a decade is kind of the assumption we're working on. You don't need to ensure that all 10 of those are going to fail. In fact, what the engineers have said is that number is probably close to 97%, that there isn't going to be a failure, a 3% failure rate. So you need far less money in reserves because we're doing it collectively. Next, please. Next, please. So the same theory holds for communal services, and municipalities currently hold 100% of the assurance for each system, knowing that only 3% are ever going to fail. So it's not economical for either the municipality or for the developer or for the homeowners. Next, please. So some general conditions. There's no obligation on any municipality to participate in the Municipal Service Corporation, although all 4 have, as well as County Council. The Municipal Service Corporation has no ability to levy participating municipalities. So similar to EORN or the EOWC, there can be a request, but there's no obligation to pay. Participating municipalities will retain full control over local planning matters, and this is really important at our governance table. The Municipal Service Corporation won't be able to tell Central Frontenac that this is how that school site in Charlotte Lake will be developed. And it will enable communal services. The municipality still will be able to enter into municipal responsibility agreement where they deem it to be appropriate, although that will double the cost of the infrastructure. And the Municipal Service Corporation is a separate corporate entity capable of borrowing, applying for grants, and contracting services. Next, please. So a review by the consultants and private operators has indicated that the fees paid by homeowners are in line with typical municipal service corporations. And just to correct what Joe was saying, currently in the city of Kingston, I pay about $125 per month. We anticipate that the fees and services included with the Municipal Service Corporation will be in line with that. And if you amortize the cost of a well and septic over a 20-year lifespan, you're roughly in the same ballpark. So growth and development pressures in Frontenac will continue, and in fact, the pandemic has done nothing but exacerbate the crunch that we're seeing for housing development. Our numbers, we expected a decline at post-pandemic. They're still as strong as ever throughout the county. And the assumption of the physical assets by the Municipal Service Corporation would follow a process similar to road assumption by municipalities. So that's in part what we want the Technical Advisory Committee to be looking at, is what does that assumption process look like? It's fairly standard for a road. There are a number of other assumption agreements throughout Ontario, and Joe has looked at some of those. So we'll develop a standard. The first report gave us a starting point for that, and we'll be working on what does the assumption of a water or sewage treatment communal service look like by the Municipal Service Corporation. Next slide, please. So what are the next steps? As mentioned, all 4 townships in the county have agreed. We've applied for incorporation, and we anticipate that the first board meeting will be held hopefully before Christmas of this year, and we'll be up and running in early 2024. Next slide. So just a number of advantages, and we've listed 11, and I'm not going to bore you by reading them because I think we've covered most of them, but I just want to concentrate on what I think for our municipalities was the important thing, is that this allows the development of housing in a manner that makes the best use of our scarcest resource, which is our land. It does so in an environmentally friendly manner that limits the number of septic systems and limits the number of wells being drilled into our delicate aquifers, and it spreads the risk across all of them. So it eliminates the need for municipal responsibility agreements, which drives down the cost for the developer and makes it far easier for any developer coming into Frontenac County. I think the other advantage is that we will have a system across the entire county that takes care of one of the biggest issues for developers, which is the provision of water and sewer. And as Joe said, the developers that we've talked to, and that was a big part of our first report, was talking to developers about how they saw this rolling out. That was their number one concern. They didn't want to be in the operating business. They didn't want to have a long-term liability. They wanted to develop homes and move on to the next development, and this will be part of it. As part of the development of the business case, we did stipulate that there would be no community benefit or dividend in the first 7 years of operation. So we have limited that aspect, and the municipalities all agreed that, for the first 7 years, we're going to be in the business of investment and building reserves, and it wouldn't be until at least 7 years in that a dividend would be declared. If you look at similar municipal service corporations, Lakeland Holdings, just to the north of you, which is Bracebridge, Huntsville, Berks Falls, Perry Sound, they're in the position of declaring dividends, and fairly substantial dividends. And but they've been in operation for a number of years and have a broad range of services from hydro to water power generation to GIS mapping and provision of internet services. So the corporation can grow and declare dividends, but we've said not for 7 years. The link in the middle there is to the municipal or the provincial housing task force. And I just want to point out that when the task force presented this report, one of their recommendations, recommendation number 4, was that these types of service corporations be developed. And I think it's recognition, in part because we've been working with municipal affairs for the last 3.5, almost 4 years, that they've always said that communal services are a preferred option. We know it is a viable option financially. We can't afford $30, $40, $50 million water and sewer treatment plants. We're in the same kind of fiscal situation as Haliburton and your townships. but we can't afford these modular Lego systems that can provide the kinds of services. So the Housing Task Force made that recommendation. We've met with the prior Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, as well as the Minister of Environment, and have been getting support at the political level and at the staff level for our initiative. And finally, last slide. So with that, that's a link to our Engage Frontenac page, which has all of the background documents, all the public consultation, as well as the business case that is being developed. And before the end of the year, we'll have the final bylaw number 1, as we call it, which will be the operating bylaw for the corporation, no different than bylaw number 1 for the Warden's Caucus or EORN, and that'll all be publicly available. And Joe and I have committed. We've made this presentation in a number of municipalities. We're here to help and support. We think this is the ideal way to promote a more rational form of growth within our municipalities. It may not be applicable in every corner of every municipality, but if we continue down the road of just doing 2-acre lots throughout Frontenac County or throughout Haliburton County, and sending our seniors off to the city, we're going to gut our rural communities, and we want to build strong rural communities capable of supporting our youth and encouraging youth to come back. So with that, Warden Danielson, both Joe and I are available till 3 o'clock to answer questions or however long you need.
Well, I can't thank you enough, both Kelly and Joe. This has been an excellent presentation. It offers us some really exciting food for thought and opportunities in how we can meet the challenges of housing here in Haliburton County. And as you say, in particular, in places like Highlands East and Algonquin Highlands, where we don't have any servicing at all. I find this really, really exciting. It's an opportunity for us to follow through on, and I would look to members of council to ask any questions that they might have. Councillor Carter. Councillor Carter, and then Councillor Fury.
Yeah, okay. Can't hear you? Can't hear me?
I can hear you. Yep.
Okay, I'm just saying that's a fantastic presentation. Makes perfect sense. I was interested to hear that Muskoka then were already had some of these approved. Didn't you say they've been used?
Muskoka, we use Lakeland Holdings as one of the cases to look at how a municipal service corporation could operate. So Lakeland Holdings is the electrical provider for Bracebridge, Huntsville, Berks Falls.
But not similar systems.
No, but there are similar systems in Muskoka. Joe actually showed a picture, and if you've been to the Marriott in Manette, that was the Marriott in Manette. And that's a new Terra system that was installed there. So there are
the province has approved them before.
Correct.
Okay. The other question is, what's the life expectancy of them?
Well, that's one of the beauties of these, is that they are completely modular. So when we did the tour of the plant, and I know Leeds and Grenville Council has also toured the plant in Brockville, just because it's handy to us and to them. It's all modular. You can buy the parts anywhere. So it's not like a massive $75 million water treatment plant that's going to have a life expectancy of 40 years. They just keep replacing parts. Okay. So yes, you may have to replace some piping. You may have to replace there is a schedule for replacing the filter media depending on what you're filtering for. It might be every 5 years, but it with proper maintenance, they just go and they're modular. So
that's great. Thank you.
Councillor Carter, you had a question?
I did. So I was interested when you said that the organization could borrow. The organization theoretically, particularly at the beginning, has no assets. And, would somebody lend you money to, it's not like buying a house that they could repossess. I'm pretty certain nobody wants to repossess your sewage treatment plant. So how does that work exactly?
Well, and that ties back into why we said we wouldn't be declaring a dividend for 7 years. So we're going to be in the business of generating. We don't have any assets right now, as you mentioned. Our goal is to have 10 in place in 10 years. At that point, we have an ongoing revenue stream that we can borrow against. In the interim, if it's required, and we think that most of this is going to be new development. But if for example, South Frontenac wanted to install another system to service another part of Verona or Central Frontenac for Charbot Lake, the borrowing could happen at the municipal level. The asset could be transferred to the corporation, and the payments could be made by the corporation. So lots of different financial models to make that happen. At maturity, the organization would have a significant revenue stream and assets to borrow against.
I have another question.
Go ahead.
Is there an opportunity for private-public partnerships here?
Not on the water side, because the province prohibits that as part of the act, but on the sewer side. But you can on the operations side. So, for example, Joe, help me out. What's the company in Ottawa that does operations?
Clearford?
Clearford does.
Yeah, we're dealing with
private-
it right now on one.
Yeah, so you can bring them in on the operations, but you still need a public entity to hold the assets, which will be our holding company, which no
Good.
different than the Warden's Caucus or EORN.
Thank you, that's good.
Any other questions? Well, I can't thank you enough for the opportunity that you've given us, for the information you provided to us. I'm sure that that we'll be following through with a lot of this information and going onto your website and reading more details and information. And I'm quite sure if we needed to contact you again about any of our questions going forward, that we're able to do that. So our sincere appreciation to both of you gentlemen for the time you've given us this afternoon.
Thank you, Warden.
Thank you again.
Absolutely available at your convenience.
Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the delegation and information? Councillors Burton and Carter.
Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Carter. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the delegation from Kelly Pender and Joe Gallivan from Frontenac County on communal servicing.
All in favor? That's carried. Could I have a mover and a seconder to confirm the proceedings of this afternoon's meeting? Councillors Shell and Burton.
Moved by Councillor Shell, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that bylaw 4203, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of Haliburton County Council, be considered to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, and the seal of the corporation be affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. And finally, motion to adjourn. Councillors Carter and Burton.
Moved by Councillor Carter, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that the September 13th, 2023 special meeting of Haliburton County Council be adjourned.
All in favor? That's carried. Once again, thanks so much, gentlemen. Much
Very
appreciated.
welcome. All the best.
And to you.
Take care.